Quite a lot of strange and sometimes frightening incidents happened in my life. I will tell you about one of them. About 4 years ago, when I was 16 years old, an incident occurred, after which I checked several times whether the door is locked every time before going to bed. That day I invited a friend to spend the night, then I lived with my parents, but they left to spend the night with friends, so there were 3 of us at home. Me, my older brother, who was 17 at the time, and my friend. My brother hung out with us for a while and went to bed, since he had to get up early in the morning. My friend and I sat in my room, watched YouTube and chatted. Around 2:00 am. My friend began to fall asleep. He fell asleep very quickly, but I didn't want to sleep and I continued to watch TV shows. Suddenly, a noise was heard from outside the house. I did not pay attention to it, since the neighbor's cats often climb onto our coal stove at night, and since the stove is lined with sheet iron, all this is accompanied by a dull metallic clang, just like the one I heard then. After that, about 5 minutes later, a barely noticeable shadow flashed past the window in front of which I have a monitor. It happened so quickly that in any other situation I would have thought that it appeared to me, but 2 suspicious events within a few minutes seemed strange. Immediately I got up from the chair and went to the front door, and damn it, not one of the 2 locks was locked. What happened next is that I almost lost my life. Having locked both locks, I decide to turn on the light in the yard and look through the peephole. When I looked into the peephole, there was a fucking face in front of him. Out of nowhere, I screamed fuck, and jumped from the door. Behind the door was the face of a man aged 25-30 who was standing close to the peephole. I looked into the peephole again to get a closer look at the stranger, and then he spoke. The stranger asked me to let him in, said that he needed help, but do you know what was the most terrible? His emotions, or rather their complete absence. The stranger's words sounded very convincing. There was real fear in his voice, as if he really needed urgent help on which his life depended, but his face showed absolutely no emotions, nothing but the movement of his lips, a completely blank look. It wasn't real scary for me. I just stood and looked at him. With every second he begged to let him in even louder, with even more fear in his voice. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned around, I saw my brother, and before I even noticed how the stranger fell silent, my brother asked me, "What are you doing?" I answered that someone climbed into our yard, after which I again looked through the peephole. There was no one in front of the door. What the hell? I thought then. I told my brother that I had just seen a man outside the door and that he had asked to let him in. He believed me and said that he had also seen someone at the window, but he thought that it had appeared to him. After that, we turned off the light in the house and started looking in the windows trying to find the stranger, but there was no one there. Suddenly, a wild scream of my friend is heard from my room. My brother and I fly into the room and see that man standing by the window in my room, with the same emotionless face, but his gaze has changed. From empty he has turned into a predatory one. Despite the fact that there was a light in the yard, and it was dark in the house and he simply could not see us, he looked directly into my eyes. I was stunned by horror, and here he gives the first and only emotion. His face stretches into a wide smile. He raises his hand to the level of his face. In his hand is seen a healthy F-con knife. Slowly raising the knife to the window, he began to methodically tap the tip of the knife on the glass while continuing to smile eerily. At that moment, my brother was already talking to the dispatcher on the phone, calling the police. I don't know why we didn't do this earlier. For some unknown reason, none of us thought about calling the police before that. As soon as my brother finished talking to the dispatcher, we ran into another room. None of us wanted to stay in the room outside the window of which this abnormal person was standing. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, but there was no one in the yard. This lunatic ran away. Based on our words, the police made a photo of the stranger. The officers contacted our parents and stayed with them until they arrived. Despite the fact that targets for this psycho were posted all over the city, he was never caught. How grateful I am to my intuition that I thought to check whether the door was closed, and to my father for his caution. There are bars on every window of our house. Who knows what would have happened if they had not been there.